Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Kali Namdar, OHEL School-Based Services and Resilience Programs Director. Tonight's webinar will explore a topic that sits at the heart of every school and every classroom: sensitivity, belonging, and the hidden stories our students carry with them. We're so grateful that you've joined us here tonight in a really busy back-to-school season. I'm not sure if some of you have already started with your professional development in your schools, but we really thank you for joining us and for making the time for this conversation. Our webinar is called If My Backpack Could Talk, and we chose that title very deliberately. Imagine for a minute that every backpack walking through your school doors could whisper its stories. Some would speak of excitement and new pencils, others would speak about worry and heavy burdens. Some would reveal family struggles, social anxiety, or trauma. And some would reveal that this past summer was actually really, really challenging, and they don't want to have to answer a whole lot of questions about it on their first day back at school. And some would share that the hope that this year would finally be different, that maybe this year they would be seen and they would be understood. As educators and mental health professionals, we're entrusted not only with teaching academics, but with really holding space for every child's story. Going back to school is not just about logistics, it's really an emotional transition as well. The way that we welcome students back, the sensitivity that we show, and the safe environments that we can create in our schools can really make all the difference between a child carrying their backpack with anxiety, with dread, or with pride. Tonight, we're going to dive deep into some practical strategies and compassionate insights to really help you navigate this back to school season with sensitivity. You're already here. We know that this is something that you want to hear more about. And what we're going to do is really explore how to tune into what our students might really be carrying with them and how to respond in ways that really build connection, build trust, and build growth. Tonight's webinar is brought to you by OHEL's Teacher Support Helpline, which is a great resource that offers confidential support to youth support professionals, to educators, to camp staff, and really everybody who supports our youth in schools within our Jewish community today, made possible by UJA Federation New York. The helpline can be reached at 718-686-3230, and it's open Monday through Wednesday, 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday through Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're really thankful to our partners in tonight's webinar, Sephardic Bikur Cholim, SBH, Prisma, and the Jewish Education Project. And let me tell you a little bit about our presenters tonight. Dr. Norman Blumenthal is a licensed clinical psychologist who serves as the Director of Trauma Services for OHEL Zachter Family National Trauma Center, and he's also an adjunct professor at the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary and Furkhoff Graduate School of Psychology, both of Yeshiva University. In private practice in Cedarhurst, New York, Dr. Blumenthal is also a Dayan, an arbitrator for the Beth Din of America, founder and chairman of the Board of Education for Kahal, and a past vice president of Nefesh. Dr. Hilary Buff, with a career spanning more than 3 decades, Dr. Hilary Buff has dedicated herself to improving the lives of children, families, and educators through her integrated work in education and clinical psychology. She holds master's degrees in both education and psychology, as well as a doctorate in clinical psychology. Dr. Hilary has spent the last 7 years serving the amazing community at SAR Academy, where she continues to support students, parents, and educators, and also consults with schools. Dr. Alana Dumont is a school psychologist at the Yeshiva of Central Queens, YCQ, and a practicing clinician in private practice. In her private work, she specializes in parent coaching and provides therapy to children, adolescents, and adults experiencing anxiety and depression. Dr. Dumont is passionate about supporting parents in strengthening family dynamics, and she uses evidence-based approaches to help individuals develop resilience, coping strategies, and emotional well-being. And lastly, Hadassah Fertig Kaplan holds a BA in Drama and Theatre from Queen's College and an MS in Education and Special Education from Tura University. She teaches second grade at Yeshiva of Central Queens, YCQ, where she brings creativity and care to the classroom and also serves as Director of Programming and Volunteer Coordinator at Friendship Circle of the Five Towns, working closely with individuals with special needs. During the summer months, she devotes herself to lifeguarding and teaching children how to swim as the aquatics director at the JCC of Lawrence. Hadassah is dedicated to helping children thrive academically and personally, and to supporting families through her work in schools and community programs. Now that we've heard about our incredible panelists, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Blumenthal. Dr. Blumenthal, can you please set the scene for us? I know that many people often turn to you when there is an issue related to trauma or an issue related to sensitivity for a child in a school setting. You know, there may be questions that relate to what could potentially be triggering for a child. Are you able to give us an overview of the kinds of challenges and questions that are brought to you and what might happen in a child's life that might impact what's happening in the classroom for them, especially as they're coming back to school?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Namdar, and it's a great privilege to share the podium with such gifted and talented colleagues. It's interesting you asked me to set the scene. As a bereavement specialist, I'm usually closing the scene. And so this is a new experience for me, and I hope I can measure up to it. And also want to make a special gratitude to OHEL, who gives us the opportunity to do this kind of work, our CEO, David Mendel, and our Presidium of Mel Zachter and Jay Kestenbaum. We'd all love to believe that children come to school carefree and assured of the stability and safety of their home, and that their biggest concerns should be which friends they're going to speak to and how many baskets they're going to score during recess. And that may be the majority of children. We don't want to sort of have a kind of gloom and doom look at things. Most children do come with this kind of more carefree approach, but many do come with that extra baggage. And I'd like to divide the types of problems that you might see in the classroom, maybe using broad strokes, in two categories. They're the very public and known stressors that a child may have experienced. If there was a recent death, and a recent death, especially if it's a death of a parent, but it could be of a sibling, maybe even a grandparent, could be a few months ago. As we sure all know, that the response to the absence of a family member, especially if it's a parent, sometimes remains dormant and emerges later on. But it's something that everybody would look at the child and say, oh, this is the orphan child. This is something that would be kind of well known. A divorce, usually, especially in a homogeneous community that most of us serve in, is often public known. Incarceration, which unfortunately happens as well. But in some respects, more challenging and perhaps even more pernicious for both the child and the teacher, some of those more private travails that may not be known and may be written all over the face of the child, and may be apparent from how they come to school, but we don't necessarily know what they are. It could be marital discord without or pre-divorce. It could be financial struggles that the family's going through, not something, again, so public and obvious. It could be a sibling who is sick, or a sibling who has to go off to a drug rehab. It could be a depressed parent who has trouble getting out of bed in the morning. It could be various kinds of sexual improprieties, a sibling who may be taking advantage of another one. And it might even be a disappointing summer, a summer where there was great anticipation about going to camp, and there was homesickness, there was bullying, and that's particularly distressing because the summer is supposed to be a time of recreation and fun. And when that doesn't happen, there's a great deal of disappointment, or maybe the fact that the family couldn't afford to send the child to camp, and that all the friends are coming back all excited about their summer, and their summer may have been more lackluster than that. And therefore, when the child is daydreaming, or if there's inattention or school refusal or misconduct aimed at distraction or an aversion for particular topics, you might be teaching Chumash and might be talking about the burial of Sarah Imenu, and there might be a parent at home who's very sick, or you might again, if there's a sibling that may have been exploiting them, and you're teaching them about Yosef and his brothers, that might hit a nerve. If you're having read a story about a child whose parent is sick, and there's a child in the school who's sick, so suddenly there's an aversive response to a particular topic. And I think all of us who are in the field of mental health or education can identify those kind of situations. So if the topic either elicits withdrawal or suddenly wild, distracting behavior, then there's some sense that this is hitting a nerve. So first of all, I want to just mention that for those of you who are in education and those of you who are in mental health, we're all sort of self-selected. We're self-selected for people who have a particular feel for other people and a particular sensitivity and a personal commitment to assisting and helping others. So we are all, in many respects, ideally suited to try to, at least even if we get a vague idea of what the child might be coming to school with, and a sensitivity to what might be done. Give an example. If a child does not do their homework or comes unprepared for an examination, I think many of us are able to discern which child is just, was busy playing video games and didn't want to be bothered, and which child, the home was not a home that was necessarily conducive, or the preoccupations of the child were such that did not allow them to expend the energy necessary to do that kind of work. So trust your instinct and trust your intuitive sense of children. Sometimes I get a phone call, a parent calls me about a third grade son and says he's doing this. Is this typical? I'll say, you know what? Why don't you call Mrs. So-and-so? She's been teaching third grade for 30 years. If anybody knows third graders, she knows third graders. So we're in an ideal position. And again, another point that we very often bring up on these webinars, and I think it bears repeating, is that the role of the teacher is changing. We don't need teachers anymore to be purveyors of information. Anything you want to know about, you can click a mouse and find out more than any teacher knows. And today you can do AI and find out even more than really exists. But some teachers' roles are transforming, and teachers today are deputized mental health professionals. Teachers are much more involved in the social, emotional adjustment of children. I often say that when I was a child, and it goes back a long time already, but if I would have gone to my Rebbe and said to him that somebody hurt my feelings, he'd look at me like I was crazy. Why are you telling me this? Go to the schoolyard and straighten it out. Like what? Why are you coming to me? But today it's something that we do, go for better or for worse. That's the nature of the world we live in. So you have an acute sensitivity to it, and you'll know, as I said, you'll know when that kid comes unprepared. You'll feel if it's really because there's some sort of preoccupation, and probably be far more forgiving and easygoing about it than you would for the kid who really does need a kick in the pants. But tonight we're going to hear from various experts from various different perspectives how to discern what is adding weight to these children's backpacks, and how not to be neither neglectful or overstep any boundary. And I look forward to our discussion tonight.
Thanks so much, Dr. Blumenthal. I forgot to mention to everybody on here tonight, if you do have a question throughout the webinar that you would like to post, just pop it in the Q&A box, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can live. So we're going to start off with a question for the rest of our panelists tonight. The title of tonight's webinar, If My Backpack Could Talk, Navigating Sensitivity and Returning to School. What goes through your head when you hear the title of this webinar, and what are you thinking about as we are returning to school that you'd like our audience here to hear more about tonight? And we're going to start with Dr. Hilary Buff.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate all the programming and support that OHEL provides us, and to my colleagues as well. When I think about the idea of if a backpack could talk, I imagine that it would tell the stories of the journeys that it shared. We see these little kids with these huge backpacks, and it would reflect both the practical and emotional, the unspoken experiences of its owner, both the wear and tear of daily life and the mundane tasks, and also to profound emotional baggage. It might speak of neglect. It may wish for cleanliness. And I imagine that our backpacks, we want to think about the contents, the owner, the journey. But I also metaphorically understand that it's a symbol of survival for a lot of our children, that it represents hope, stability that they may or may not get, um, an emotional container, not just the physical items, but it contains kind of the burdens. And it's a partner for a lot of our children, right? They carry it from the time they're very little till they're, older in high school. I imagine that, in some ways, the backpack, if it could say something, it may be a simple statement like, let me always carry your dreams, not just your burdens. Let me help you walk lighter, even when your world feels very heavy. That's what I'm thinking about tonight.
Love that. Thank you so much for that positive spin on things as well. It's really important for us to keep all that in mind. And for some children and for many children, and I'm sure a lot of people on here tonight would resonate with you that when these children come to school, you may be the person that helps them see that light. You know, kids who are coming back to school so excited because the stability that the school environment really provides for them. So let's try to keep that front and center as well. Dr. Dumont.
Hi, good evening. I just want to say, Dr. Buff, I thought that was so beautifully said. Mine is a little bit different. I think I had a little bit of a different reaction when I heard the title when Dr. Namdar and I first spoke about it, and maybe I'm a little bit more of a pessimist. I don't know. When I heard it, I definitely had a little bit of a personal reaction to it. I had this immediate visual of a little kid walking into a school building and looking very just weighed down, like literally, figuratively, like burdened. Whether, it's the first day of school or if it's mid-year, I even had my own personal memories of my own experiences, friends that I recall where I thought if only a teacher or some adult in the building knew what myself or that friend was walking in with that day, if they would just maybe go a little bit easier on me today, ask me if I'm okay. I totally don't have the guts to let them know myself that I'm not okay. But if only they could just tell. And, all of us in the educational field, we welcome hundreds of kids into a school building each day, and we really have no idea, nor should we really know, what is going on for them outside of school necessarily. But if each day we could greet them with a little bit more sensitivity, understanding that maybe because we don't know, that the way that they're presenting themselves in a classroom can sometimes really be a reflection of something else that's going on for them, something that's like, in the backpack that they're keeping in the backpack. And when I introduce myself to the parent body, I always outline for them when it's appropriate for them to reach out to me as the psychologist, to the counseling department. And I always say it's, big family changes, if you're noticing specific things in your child that are concerning. And it's never because I always say I'm not trying to be nosy, I'm not trying to be intrusive. And it's certainly not because I want to give any student a pass necessarily, but we do want to be there to support and understand and help anyone adjust to anything that they need. So, that was sort of my initial reaction to it.
Thank you so much. And now if we could hear from Hadassah.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. So I guess I looked at it from like the perspective of a teacher. When you're right now, we're at the point in the year where everyone's getting their class lists and maybe they're asking old teachers about information about the kids, and maybe there's stuff that they do know, stuff that they don't know. But on day one, it's important to remember that every kid's going to walk in with every kid should walk in with a clean slate. And when they all walk in with their big backpacks, weighing them down with all the school supplies, you'll see like the worn out, tattered backpacks that maybe give you some sort of indication of what's going on, or the super fancy backpacks that they bought at the coolest place in town. And those are the things that you do know. There are things you know that you can make an assumption about at least. And then there's the things inside the backpack that are hidden in the pockets that maybe you don't know about. And it made me think about a situation that occurred in my own classroom where I had a student that coming in, I was shared information about him. Um, and because of that, I was able to be more sensitive and aware and understanding of thing like when he acted out, I would understand. I'd be like, oh, because of this and this and this, that's why. So now I'm not so frustrated when he does this. And then I had another student in my class who was constantly acting out and being silly and calling out and disrupting my class. And I did obviously everything, the positive reinforcement and the consequence and the call the positive home, make him the class leader. Um, and then finally one day, obviously I spoke to him before that, but I sat down with him and I said, like, what's really going on here? And he shared with me that he was actually experiencing almost an identical situation as the other student. And like that really resonated with me of you need to be sensitive and give support and understanding to not just the student who walks in and you see their backpack and you see it's all tattered and you know what's going on, but also the student that you don't know what's going on and what's hidden in that little pocket in the back of their knapsack. And that was my take.
Thank you. And this topic is bringing back memories of coming back to school and returning to the buildings after COVID, right? And that everybody can remember that first return to school. We also, I think one thing that it's important for us to really keep front and center is the idea also that we don't know about our colleagues, right? The other teachers in the building, other administrators, parents, other people that were janitors, custodians, everybody security, everybody that's in a school building, everybody has something that they may be carrying, and just that little bit of compassion and curiosity can really go such a long way. Okay, so now we're going to move into, we have two scenarios prepared that we'd like to walk through with you. We've put together a few scenarios based on the, common situations that can come up. If anybody has any questions throughout the webinar, again, please drop them in the Q&A box. We're going to start. So let's deal with scenario one. Okay, the school finds out that there is a parent in the school who has been diagnosed with cancer over the summer. Okay, there are multiple children in the school of different ages. The children are returning to school just like they've returned to school every other year, but now they are really living in a different reality. The children are the following ages. We have a third grader in the school, we have a seventh grader in the school, and we have a ninth grader in the school. And when I talk about a school, we're one big community school that services, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Dr. Dumont, are you able to share with us some general ideas, some general guidelines to keep in mind in terms of working with and supporting this family from the school's perspective?
Sure. So in a situation like this, especially with multiple children, siblings throughout the school, I think one of the more important things to keep in mind is to have sort of like a point person who is going to be the one that communicates with the family. I think that when you have siblings that span the school, you have multiple teachers, principals, and you probably have different reactions from them to some who want to be very much in touch with the family, maybe others who are having some type of a reaction that kind of causes them to maybe stay away. And so while everybody is well-meaning for the family's sake, it's usually best to have one person. So that's usually somebody like myself, the psychologist. Sometimes it's maybe a principal who's sort of like the representative from the school. So that person can be in touch and streamline things from all the teachers. Gather up the information, keep things coordinated so that it doesn't overwhelm the family and that they're not receiving multiple calls from different places. And then this way, also the family knows that there's one person that they can contact to share updates with the teachers and that they don't need to be, calling multiple people as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's focus a little bit now on the children, the ages of the children. We've got a third grader, a seventh grader, and a ninth grader. So they're all coming back to school. And let's talk about supporting the Hadassah. Are you able to share with us about, as a teacher, from a teacher's perspective? A lot of us on this webinar tonight, on this panel, are mental health professionals. We specifically wanted to hear from a teacher. We know today also that children can often spend more of their awake hours, especially young children, with a teacher in the classroom than they do with their parents, right? So Hadassah, can you share with us, how would you support or what should we keep in mind in terms of supporting the third grader, the elementary school student in the classroom?
Okay, so I actually I did experience this in my own classroom, and I looked at it as how can I support the parent that the parent who needs to deal with their spouse who's going through whatever they're dealing with, in a way that he knows that like I have it under control. So I started the year with reaching out to the parent and letting him know that, like, in terms of homework, that I would, most kids in second, third grade elementary school, their parents are helping them with their homework. So I said to him, I said, I'm letting you know that whether he does his homework or doesn't do it, I can understand. If he does it, that's great. And if he doesn't, I'll have my assistant sit with him at once sometimes to go over what he missed. I also spoke to the parents at like the beginning of the year also, and I got permission to, if something came up in terms of academic needs or social emotional needs, that I got his permission in the very beginning of the year to get him evaluated or assessed or anything that would need to be done, so that I wouldn't need to call him up all like again and again here and there to discuss it. I just said, let me get your permission now, and then I'll go through what is if it comes up. And in terms of the child, I early on, what I typically do with my students, when I'm doing reading assessments in the beginning of the year, I don't know if everyone does that, but I bring in like a few interview questions. I'll ask them like, what's your favorite color? And I do this just like in the hallway when I'm doing the reading assessment, not in front of the other kids. But what's your favorite color? What did you do this summer? What's your favorite activity to do? And who lives with you? Who is in your family? Not who lives with you. Who is in your family? And I kind of just I gauged based on his response whether or not he wanted to discuss it further. And from what I observed from that conversation and seeing him in class was that he wanted to keep to himself. He didn't want to share. So I kind of like gave a step back, but I made it clear to him that if he ever needed to take a break, he could just let me know and he could go take a walk and come back when he was ready. So that was my, based on gauging how he didn't want so much attention and so much energy on him, I said I gave him this opportunity to take a break as needed. And that I felt like was my way of showing support and sensitivity to him without making like a huge deal about it. And just another thing, like when Mother's Day came around, like to just think maybe your class doesn't need to make a Mother's Day project this year. Or the child's birthday, I sent a message to the other parent and I said, like, I know your child's birthday is coming up. Let me know if you have a plan, because I did hear the child telling other kids that he was going to have a birthday in school. And like just to make sure that there was an actual plan. So if there wasn't a plan, I can make sure something was going on. And yeah, just overall gauging whether the child wants attention or not was, I found to be very helpful.
I love the fact that you're talking about asking the child and really taking the child into account to see what do they want, right? So many children and families, when they're going through something like this, everybody just assumes. And I think that giving people the agency to make the decisions as much as they can is such an important piece of this. So, I'd love to have you as one of a teacher in one of my kids' schools. Um, so, Dr. Buff, let's talk a little bit about I know you work a lot with middle school and high school age. If we were thinking about supporting the 7th grade and 9th grade student, what can you share?
I love what Dr. Dumont and Hadassah spoke about in terms of a point person and some of these practical everyday experiences for the 3rd grader. What we're thinking about when we're talking about the tween teen is how do we create consistency and a space where they feel understood? Now, we know developmentally, these, our teenagers are really balancing emotional growth. They're kind of up and down anyways on a day to day, and with increasing independence. And they may struggle really to process complex feelings, especially if it is fear, uncertainty, loss. So, a few key issues I always try to think about, whether it's a traumatic experience, is getting some of the details so that the one person that is the least talking with the parents, as Dr. Dumont spoke about, that we kind of know, was a child at camp and came home to this? Was a child experiencing changes at home? Really, what is the teen going through? But normalizing their experience. And this may just be something that has to be said to the teen, that there is a wide range of emotions. They may be numb. They may be angry. They may have guilt, and it's okay. And that they're normal and valid, and reassure them that what they're going through is normal. And that can bring a lot of peace and grounding to a teenager. The thing that's hard, and I'll say this, in the education space, is that we often want to give them a break, right? They're going through so much. Like, let's ease up on things. But actually, while flexibility is important, maintaining routines and expectations for this child at school gives them structure and a real sense of stability, that they're like everyone else. We're not doing them any favors if we say, you don't have to do homework or you don't have to do these things. That school can be a refuge from chaos, and consistency in these expectations in their environment can be very grounding. I find this very hard because it goes against what we want to do. We want to comfort, and we think comfort comes from, nothing hard. But actually, they're going to watch their parent go through hard things, and we want them to know they can do hard things, that we still believe in them, and more importantly, that, will support academic adjustments, but that doesn't mean that we don't believe in them. I also think that we have to open all channels for communication. As like Hadassah said, our teenagers might not want to talk. So I really do social engineering, right? If I've got a sports, kid, I'll say, listen, I need to learn some basketball. Come play basketball with me. If I have someone who's a reader, I'll say, listen, I really want to read a good book. Can we read one together? I find ways. And if it's not me, I have a teacher, someone who this child, this teenager connects with, because we're not forcing conversation. We're letting them lead the pace, but we want to check in every once in a while. You okay? Is everything going okay? Do you need something? And I lastly want to say that one of the greatest gifts we can give all of us that are going through hard things, but especially teenagers, is purpose when they're struggling. When they can help other people, it's a real gift. And I think it's something, again, that like sometimes we say they have so much on their shoulders. Why would we give them more responsibility? And, if you've ever sat in a hospital or in a doctor's office and time, is just passing so slow, it's not always their closest friend. But by helping others, it gives them a real sense of control in a situation they may not feel they have any control in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I feel like I'm hearing Dr. Blumenthal speak also. I know, Dr. Blumenthal, you speak a lot about the idea of, relaxing expectations, but everything with a time limit, right? So, Dr. Blumenthal, if you could just give us, is there anything that you think we may have missed here, or anything you'd like to add to a situation like this?
So here I'm going to get back to the theme I mentioned before, where teachers are much more involved in the emotional and social adjustment of the child. So what I'd like to propose is that the teacher can impart messages to the child, and if applicable, even to the classmates, in the context of the instruction. So for example, one of the struggles with cancer is there's so much uncertainty. Cancer is a very big word nowadays. Many can be cured, many can be treated, many are. There are types of cancers which the survival rate is very low, and very often there's that ambiguity. What's in the future? Waiting for those scans and waiting for that time period when you're into remission. So which is a great challenge, is that ambiguity. How do you handle the ambiguity? So let's say you're a Judaic studies teacher. Let's say you're teaching Bible, and you come to the story of Jacob facing Esau, and he didn't know what to expect. He had no idea whether he'd be attacked, whether he'd be embraced. And we're taught that he prepared for every eventuality. Doran Tefillah Milchama. He prepared, he had gifts for him. He was praying, and he also was ready to fight if he had to protect himself. And how you can hold within your brain all the different eventualities and overcome some of that ambiguity. So if I'm wondering, and again, I'm not a teacher, in fact, quite the contrary, the reason why I went into trauma is because I so traumatized my teachers. But if if indeed as a teacher, if you have a child in a predicament like that, or or if there's references to anything that you're teaching biology, you teach about the amazing immune system of the body, and maybe there can be some way in which you can integrate into that instruction very important messages for this child and for the classmates. You're sort of bridging that the gap, if you will, between being an educator and, as I said, a deputized mental health professional.
Okay. Dr. Blumenthal? Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we just have a question that came in through the Q&A. I'm not trained in mental health, although I seem to be dealing a lot with mental health things that keep coming up in my class. What signs or red flags should I look out for in case somebody in my classroom might be dealing with something that I don't know about? I'm guessing if any one of our panelists want to just unmute and respond to the question.
I would just say, for one of the first kind of, lines of defense with a red flag is, does something seem out of the normal? Right? Has there been a change? Now, it's hard to say this in the beginning of the year because you might not know the student well. So the first thing I'd say is, if possible, speak to last year's teacher or anyone who might know this child. Has something different, because what we kind of say is we all go through things, and that's the wonderful thing about school, is that as educators we really, our children go through hard things, both with the big trauma and little trauma, and we want to kind of be there for them. But what really kind of becomes important is it something that's interfering with their daily life? So if they've changed all of a sudden, they are not going out to play soccer anymore and they love soccer. They are not coming to school on time and they've always come to school on time. They are not clean, or there's these big changes that you can notice. That's a gift. Now, sometimes we don't have the opportunity to see the big change. So I would first just say, if there's any way to see if there is a change in behavior, a change in any aspect of the student, that would be really where I would start.
I can also just add something. I was going to say something similar to, if we know the student first, then to notice any significant changes. And I just want to add, first of all, that I have the privilege of working with Hadassah, and I like the way that this question came in to say that this teacher is saying they're not a mental health professional, but I think this speaks to what Dr. Blumenthal started with, is that there really is an extension of the teacher's role these days, where it's not just teaching math, chumash, or whatever the content is of the subject, but it's really being able to see the whole child, which Hadassah always does, and I've worked very closely with her on several challenging situations. And something that I always tell teachers also is that kids, especially kids who have trouble articulating how they feel, they'll act how they feel. So if they behave in certain ways and you're noticing that it's, a problem or a disruption of your class, I would urge teachers to really look beneath the behavior and not react to what's happening on the surface, but to take that maybe as a clue that it's really a manifestation of something else that is happening for the student.
And just to add, same concept, but even like a child who's typically energetic in your classroom and you're noticing that they're falling asleep at their desk, or we're doing homework every single day, and then it started like 1, 2 days they didn't do homework, and then it goes on for a week straight. That could be an indicator of something. Or someone who starts crying over like silly things. I mean, not silly, obviously. Everything is valid if that's what a child is feeling, but like if their pencil broke and they get overly emotional about that, that's definitely an indicator. Or if they're acting out, or the opposite, if they're acting out and they never did before, or if they're very quiet and they used to be the loudest one in the room. So those are just things that I've observed that indicate something's going on. And also to listen to the things they say, not just during class time, but during lunch, during recess, during transitions out of the room, of there are things that kids will say and share with each other, and just to keep an ear out and an eye out to things that they're not necessarily saying to you, but things that you could pick up from listening in.
I think also perhaps it's important to just pay close attention. If you notice, this child had come in with the most elaborately packed, or like a lunch or snacks that were done a certain way, and there seems to be like changes in some kind of these routines or different things like that. It's important to keep that in mind too. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I want to bring up let's move on to our second scenario now. We have many children who are returning to school, and they're anticipating that first day back at school, where some of the teachers go around the room and they ask everybody to share. Tell us about your summer. Tell us about what you did over the summer. And there could be a range of children that they may have had a challenging summer. Camp might not have worked out. You may have a child in your classroom with a learning disability, who with dyslexia, perhaps, where they're coming back to school really anxious about what they have to face in front of them. You may have a child with, there are so many different kinds of scenarios that can come up. Maybe there was a child where camp didn't work out for them, right? Where they struggled socially at camp, or just generally they have social anxiety. There could be so many different reasons why a child might struggle in coming back to school. And many of us make assumptions very quickly, right? We also have classrooms full of lots of kids. And there may be many children in the classroom that are struggling with what they're coming back to school with. So what are some ideas that we can keep in mind in thinking about these students in our classrooms? So Dr. Buff, if you could help us out here.
Sure. I love this idea about, the assumptions. And we do that. And in some ways it can be very helpful, when we're working with children. But I think starting with curiosity is the first step, and not assumption. I'm noticing that my student is looking a little down or can't stop talking. I wonder what that is. I think that's an important piece here. We start usually with excitement and creativity, and how do we kind of really start with some compassion and some curiosity about who our students are. I think often that if we can foster our own trauma-informed lens. I am not a trauma expert. I'm the first to say that I've actually been, I would say a student of Dr. Blumenthal, like he didn't know, but, for years, because that's not a background that I have. But I do know that what I've learned from his work is that behavior is communication. And so the shutting down or the acting out or the struggling,
may be a response to an uncertainty or a past negative experience. It's not necessarily defiance. And figuring out how we empower without pressuring. When students have had a hard summer, returning to school may feel like a great reset. This year, I'm going to do amazing, or it may be very overwhelming. So, how do we meet our students where they are? On the road, not where we are, and rebuild these routines and confidence gradually because they may not have that in place. How do we celebrate the small wins and offer choices and opportunities? Um, I also just want to say one other piece is that before diving into academics, as we keep repeating Dr. Blumenthal's, wise thought about that our teachers are much more and have always been much more than just educators. You can be parents, you can be have so many roles in a child's life. When we prioritize connection, that actually, I think, brings a psychological safety to our children. So, I work with teachers that every day just say, checking in, just doing a quick check-in. And they just do a come back and they come back and they say, how are you? How's it going? And they do it like once a week. And that allows the students an opportunity. It's kind of a simple, warm, I'm glad to see you. And that can go a long way. I lastly want to say that one thing I think we forget is some of our teachers come back also having had a hard summer. I don't know about you, but every year I say, summer, it's like this, like kind of like this glorious time that I'm going to accomplish all these things. And I don't always get to do that. And so I come back to school with a little bit of anxiety, not a little, a lot. And so, how do we take care of the caregivers? That means you. How do you stay grounded and regulated? Because that's powerful and that becomes a model to many of our students that are coming back dysregulated and maybe not having a schedule or stability that you can offer them during the year.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Dr. Dumont.
So yeah, some of my thoughts might echo a little bit of what Dr. Buff was saying, but similarly, just we don't know about every child's summer. So when your new students, you're about to get this new roster, they enter your classroom, to really just have them come in and kind of exude to them neutrality. Obviously excited to start, excited to see them, but a neutral stance on who these new kids are for you. I think that most schools, all of our classrooms are sort of like in the same hallway. We kind of look at the kids who are the grade behind the one that we're teaching maybe, right? And it's very easy to see your new class and look at the students and say, oh, that one looks familiar. I think he was the one that was like always in the principal's office, or she was the one that was always tantruming in the hallway. And I think it's really important that we do our best to not judge our students immediately based on any behaviors that you've seen in the past, any of them who come in with maybe reputations, which often happen, but to really give each student a fresh start at the beginning of the year. And again, to just repeat that, to really just see their behaviors as manifestations maybe of a feeling that they can't really articulate yet. Similarly to what Dr. Buff said, all the teachers that I work with know I place a really big emphasis on the relationship between the teacher and the student, even similar to a parent and a child, right? They're spending so much time with you every single day. There's research that shows that this relationship is really what helps a student feel safe in the classroom. And when the student feels safe, that is what contributes to academic success. And so to really, invest time in that relationship is for everybody's benefit.
Thank you. Hadassah.
So I wanted to hone in on that point again of giving your students a clean slate when they walk in, whether you did walk up to their old teacher or you did get a message about them, full clean slate, give them a new year, a new teacher, a new sensitivity, and a new perspective. And I did want to share about ways to go about on your first few days of school in your classroom that don't focus on dwelling on the past and dwelling on the summer, because you don't know what happened in your kids in your students your kids. I feel like all teachers call their students their kids. Your student summer, and just like some specific things that I do in my own classroom is I don't have them sit there and share about their summer because one kid might have gone on an extravagant vacation and the one next to them spent the summer crying all day about something going on in their house, and one went to camp all summer and had the best time, and the other one stayed home or went to camp and had the worst summer. So just not to dwell on that. If that's like a prompt you like to write to do in the beginning of the year, to do individual journal writing, but not necessarily have the kids get up and share. And when I do journal writing individual, I'll give the students the option of, if you want me to read it, leave your notebook on my desk and I'll read it. Otherwise, I respect that and I won't read what's in their journal. And to focus on an all about me project instead of the past, go forward. What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your favorite color? All that. Another cute thing that I do also is I have them write down questions that they have. It can be questions about me, questions about our school, questions about what they want to, anything, just questions in general. And then last year, I made a PowerPoint a few days later and I put their questions up there and I answered them live, like in front of them. And they were so excited when their question came up on the board. And I even I put in like pictures of pictures. It was like, what was your favorite food? So I put in sushi, a picture there. And it was just very cute of giving them the opportunity to be a part of it, but just talk about my new teacher, my new class, the new things I'm doing, as opposed to dwelling on the past.
Love
Thank-
that. Love that. I love that you really highlighted their questions. So it's yeah, really, really great. Dr. Blumenthal, is there anything that we left out here or anything you'd like to add?
I doubt it. I'm actually very grateful that Mara Hadassah didn't give me a reading assessment before we went on this on this webinar, because I'm not sure how I would have scored. I have a few thoughts just very quickly. First of all, trust your guts. As I said before, you are self-selected to know children. And if you're interacting with the child, and even if you can't quite pinpoint it, but there's something that in your gut that tells you there's something wrong here, there's something off here, trust that impression. Maybe then go talk to the various experts in the school, or maybe go back and look into what's going on with the child. But as I said, you are self-selected. You have a knack for reading people and reading children. And I think you need to take that into consideration. I was also thinking in terms, and I was actually going to say a lot of what Hadassah was going to say, but probably not quite as well. That again, when we ask about how was your summer, we don't know if everybody had a great summer. It's a risky place to go. But when we have a future orientation, we all dream. We all hope. So if the focus is more on anticipating, what can we anticipate, what can we look forward to in this year, you're probably more tapping into more what's universal among the children. However, I will say one of the very interesting symptoms of people, both children and adults, who go through trauma is something called foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is an inability to look forward to stuff, and that's very atypical for children. Children very much are excited about the future. They're very future oriented when they grow up, what they're going to be, who they're going to marry, where they're going to live. And a child, for example, who doesn't go there is very often a child who's had quite a bit of trauma. But you could look at it then, but then again, focusing on the future and trying to instill some sense that the future can be better could be very healing and ameliorative to a child.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We actually have a comment here in the chat that somebody put in this great idea of starting more than just a question inventory, like an interest inventory, right? For teachers and other people who are working with students to really keep track of what are the kinds of things that our kids in our classrooms are interested in, and maybe we can, develop and do something with that. Okay, we have, as we are nearing the closing of our webinar, we want to just, we have some rapid fire questions. We want to hear from our panelists tonight. I'm going to ask a round of questions, and we want to hear just some quick thoughts that come to mind for you that you'd like to leave our audience with tonight. So based on what we have discussed tonight, how do you think we can help our teachers, help whoever is on this webinar tonight stay more attuned to the sensitivities that are really needed in schools today? Also keeping in mind that we may not know what is going on in the life of a child. Some parents, for whatever reason, may not feel that they are ready to let a school know. Some parents may also feel like, you know, the community they live in, some of the people that work in the school are from the same community and they're not comfortable sharing. And we are all on the same team helping children, but we also want to respect parents' wishes and parents' wishes for confidentiality sometimes that really might be needed for a family. So can we start with Hadassah? What are your thoughts on this question?
Um, in order to stay aware of the sensitivities is just, I think a big important thing that I personally forget is the point that we've all been bringing up, that you don't know. You don't know what your child is walking into with and what your students are walking in with. And obviously, you should be sensitive and aware of the situations that you do know about and care for the child and observe and try to navigate and figure out the best way to approach that child. But to also just know that every single child has their own life, their own family, their own issues, and keep that in mind when you're getting frustrated at a specific student for anything of how would I react to this if it was that student? To just give every single student the same exact sensitivity and feeling from their teacher that you would give whether you know or you don't know what's going on.
Any of our other panelists?
Yeah, I would say also again to just like we keep saying, stay connected to all your students. Don't see yourself as somebody who's just teaching your lesson, but look for ways outside of the lesson time. And I tell teachers all the time, lunch and recess, that is where it's at. It's really not in the classroom, but it's really those times in the hallway transitions that you really have these opportunities to connect with your students. And I think also we're thinking something like, well, maybe there's nothing going on. Why do I, but you're laying groundwork, right? Because inevitably, whether it's something small or something big, you want your students to see you as someone that they can come to. And so you're investing into this relationship so that you can be that person for them if it's needed.
I love that idea, Dr. Iman, of the seeds that we don't know. And please, God, we should be blessed with a wonderful, healthy, happy year for not only ourselves, all of you and our students, but we don't know. And if we did know, what would we do different, right? So I really feel like our classrooms are training grounds, not only for academic growth, but for courage, teaching resilience, empathy, and leadership. And when we model that, and we have that towards our students, no matter what comes up, we can be prepared at least to be a presence, a stable presence, a safe presence in all of our students' lives.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. We just have a question that's just come in the Q&A. And Dr. Blumenthal, this question is for you. Someone is asking, they are returning to school and a student that is entering their classroom has recently lost a parent. A parent has recently passed away. Within those first few, and this is a child that has come from a different school. They are transferring now into the school. There is a chance that children in the classroom will not know this student and they may not know the student's background. What advice could you give to this teacher as she is entering back to school?
So part of the quandary for a child, especially an elementary school age child, in a predicament like this is, as I'm sure my colleagues here know, elementary school age children in particular don't want to stick out. They want to be part of the larger group. They don't want a focus. They don't want a spotlight on them. So a child who's coming to school, especially if it's a new child, where she wants to integrate, but a child who's coming to school after a tragedy of this magnitude will go out of his way to want to be normal and unperturbed. If I visit a child at a shiva for a parent and I say to the child, I'm going to your school tomorrow, is there anything you want me to tell your classmates? I can almost predict the response here. Treat me normally. Don't treat me differently. But I often tell the story. I was once actually in a foreign country where a parent died in a helicopter crash, and there was a third grader who was now both his parents lost both his parents, is orphaned. And I was meeting with the teachers, and they told me that he has what they call a nemesis. He has a kid who's always fighting with him. So they said, we're going to try to convince this child not to fight with him anymore. I said, don't you dare. Tell the kid we can punch him in the nose and start the fight all over. That's what the kid wants. He wants to be normal. The only problem is that when a child has a wellspring of emotions and is suppressing them, sometimes there are what we often refer to as the outbursts. Sometimes it just suddenly explodes and it really comes out. And often what we suggest then in situations like this, and these things happen, is to say, now, of course, now here the child doesn't want the attention drawn to himself, and now suddenly the whole class, oh, Moshe's crying, Moshe's. So I often suggest that we try to do something school-wide. I don't know how many of you know Moshe's mother died this past year. Let's say some special prayer for his mother, or let's have a moment of silence for his mother. So spread it out and make him part of the larger group. But that's the quandary you're going to have. And probably the last thing the child wants is for you to say, yeah, I know your mother died. You want to talk to me? That's going to even probably make it worse. But be alert and be aware of what child is, the emotions the child has. And if something like this does happen, try to make it a class-wide commemoration. There's a lot more to say about that, but and if there are any further questions, please feel free to contact me.
Right. I think I just want to echo back to what Dr. Dumont spoke about earlier, the idea of having a point person in the school for this family, right? Even as the child is in a new school, in a new setting, having this family situation, it's really important as the child is entering the school to have someone established for that child to talk to touch base with, and as much as possible for that person to give the teachers a heads up. I mean, I'll never forget, I had a student many years ago who, their first day of school in a new school, they had just transitioned, having lost their parent the year before to a different school setting, and their first class, somebody made, a comment about their mother, and the child just ran out of school and wasn't able to come back for the rest of the day, and that was their first day of school. So just that added sensitivity and just that having that point person that can help give that background before the start of school and let the child know there is someone here for you to talk to. And it may not be the mental health professional. It may be their grade advisor, a particular rabbi, or give them a choice of, who would you want your person to be if they do know other people in the school. I think that cannot be emphasized enough. I don't know, do any of our other panelists want to share any advice based on this situation, or if anything you've ever dealt with anything similar to this?
I think the one piece that I would also consider are the friends, or the rest of the class, what their experience will be. If you are an anxious child and you hear that someone lost a parent, right? The other children may need support. So, I think we see this sometimes. We are focusing on the child that's experienced the loss, or the illness or whatever it is, but this may bring up uh, concerns for the other children, and it does need to be addressed. And I think, there is kind of a contagion theory with our children with anxiety, with these issues, especially when they're young and they can't make sense of it. So I would just say, like, an understanding of how it will be approached for the class, for the peers, for the friend group.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. Let's transition over to another question now. We've spoken about a lot of different ideas tonight, right? Dr. Blumenthal, you mentioned that, people are often, first of all, if you're coming to this webinar tonight, that already shows you're sensitive card within you, right? You're coming here, you've got a busy back to school season. Many of you might have been in trainings all day today, or you're starting tomorrow, whatever might be on your calendar, and juggling a lot of different things. We've spoken about the idea of trusting your gut. We've spoken about people really being in an ideal position, and the role of teacher today and educator as really changing and taking on a larger scope. What is one idea that you would love to leave with our audience tonight? Any of our panelists, if you want to share, what is one parting idea, like one final thought related to if my backpack could talk?
Something I just want to say that we didn't say this explicitly throughout, but I've had teachers with sensitive situations in their classroom asking me questions like, what should I be doing for this child? Like, what can I do? And then of course I'm pressured with, well, what should she do? What's the right answer here, right? But I think for every teacher to keep in mind that just do what you're doing. And the fact that you're showing up every single day for this student who is maybe dealing with something chaotic or unstable outside of your classroom, but the fact that you're a constant for this student and just do your thing, have your routine. I think it was Dr. Buff who said it before, they want structure. And so if we can provide that for them in the school setting, we're doing so much for them by just doing our job every day. So I think that's just something to take away.
I think a takeaway is also just make sure to talk to your students. Like if you feel that there's something going on, talk to them. And what they may share, they may not share, but don't just sit there and think like, oh, there might be something going on, there might be not. Talk to the students and then base how you're going to react based on whether they're willing to share what they share or how they react to you wanting to further a conversation with them, a general conversation.
I think in a spiritual way, I think of Hashgacha Pratis, right? The idea that Hashem has wanted you as a teacher to be with the student, walking with them in some way. And I think it's easy day after day. You're waking up early, you work, I always say it's like you're heroes. You're doing the holiest work. Like, I can't imagine like someone really signing up to be an educator if you go through all the cons of the work. And I think Dr. Blumenthal has said it so perfectly. Like you are called to this work. And I think the idea that you are right where you need to be, just being you and being kind and enjoying your students, that is so healing for children. And the more connection they have to people who believe and see in their own greatness, I think can only help them through the darkest of times and create a light that I hope will take them through their life.
I can chime in. Part of the OHIL trauma team was sometimes through the telephone helpline. We'll get calls, let's say from a parent. One example, they just got diagnosed with a dreaded disease. And of course, they're quite distraught themselves, but they're very worried about their children and what's going to be with their children. And sometimes I say to them, I'm going to make a prediction. I like to quote Yogi Berra that predicting is very hard, especially about the future. But I'm going to make a prediction. About 6 months from now, you're going to call me and you're going to say, I can't believe how incredible they were. I can't believe how attuned and perfect they were throughout all of this. Children aren't pieces of porcelain. They're not China dolls. They know what they need. They communicate to us what they need. And they know how to extract from us, adults, the help that they need, even if sometimes they communicate it obliquely. And I can tell you from being in this field 4 decades. I beat you by 10 years, Dr. Buff, but that I can't tell how many stories I've heard from people who've went through traumatic experiences in their childhood, and certain adults and very often teachers were ones who did not anything spectacular. There was no splitting the Red Sea, but just a sensitive remark, a little extra something, a little extra little trinket that they gave someone on a very difficult day, and how important and how much that meant to them and how much that sustained them. So trust yourselves and trust children. Children are really remarkable.
We actually, thank you so much, Dr. Blumenthal, and all our panelists. We actually had a great comment that was just dropped in the Q&A, and somebody posted that maybe it would be an idea to use the title of tonight's webinar, If My Backpack Could Talk, literally as a prompt for children to share their thoughts or aspirations about school or home in coming back to school. Now that is something that really, it sounds like, you know, that could potentially be a great idea. I just want to thank everybody for coming and signing on to our webinar tonight. I'll never forget, just echoing Dr. Buff, what you mentioned before. A few years ago, I was privileged to be in a school and giving a teacher presentation. And one of the rabbis in the room said that he got up in front of a whole room of teachers and said, I really believe that every year before I come and I, meet my students in my classroom, it's almost like God calls out and says, it's like a shidduch, it's like a match, right? God chooses who the teacher is for the particular classroom, for the children in the classroom. And it's a divine match. I am meant to be their teacher because I can help them. There's some kind of way that we can grow together and we can progress throughout the year together. So just lots of thoughts running through my mind. I'm sure there's been a lot of food for thought shared here tonight. I want to thank our incredible panelists for sharing their wisdom. I want to remind everybody that this webinar tonight is brought to you by OHEL's Teacher Support Helpline. We are available. We're actually under the supervision of Dr. Norman Blumenthal, so that's a real privilege for us. And we're available to take calls, consultations regarding challenges that can come up in the classroom. And we'll send you more information about our helpline in the email that will come to you after registering for this webinar. Please remember, everyone, if you can fill out the survey after this webinar, it'll be really helpful for us to get your feedback, to keep bringing you quality programs and to really hear what you might be looking for. I want to thank everybody who came to our webinar tonight. I want to wish everybody a safe, successful, and a year full of growth and resilience, and a Shana Tova to everybody. Thank you, everyone.